Welcome to the Brilliant Soul Gathering. This is a gift offering for parents and caregivers on how to nurture the sacred soul flame within. The intention is to support our listeners with navigating the challenging times that we're going through and to give them inspiration on how to be the light in the darkness. And today I have a wonderful speaker, Nura Rachelle. Nura is an integrative astrologer, writer, and guide, weaving wisdom from West and East, ancient and modern. Her path opened up with yoga, a practice of integration and loving self awareness that informs her approach to astrology. Through this holistic lens, her work cultivates trust, creativity, connection, confidence, and a deep connection to each person's unique rhythm and inner wisdom. Thank you, Nora, for being here today. Tell us more about who you are.
Thank you so much, Nadine. It's so wonderful to be here. I really love this topic and the summit that you've put together.
Thank
So, as you mentioned, I've been an astrologer, but really just a student and explorer of all the different ways that there are to know myself, to know my family, actually. That has always been very central. Coming from a pretty mixed family and all sorts of really interesting ancestral stories and mixed lineages, I was always very passionate about the topic of ancestry. And then you get into these very interesting realms with astrology or even, intuitive healing, and you start to get into this realization, wow, there's so much more happening. I'm so much more connected to what's going on than I really knew. And so that exploration has really informed my personal healing, but it's also helped me to heal a lot in my family. And I very much believe that those of us who are called to these kinds of explorations, you might identify with this as kind of being like a breaker of chains, or somebody who's here, at this time in this part of the lineage to really shift the pattern, to really bring some light and awareness. So that's been kind of the cliff notes high level of my journey with astrology, but it's absolutely my favorite way to dive into charts with people because, in the end of the day, it's a tool. It's kind of like the saying, the map is not the territory, but you can use the map to really understand the territory or how to be in it, or how to think about it in a way that's really loving and forgiving and freeing, really liberating.
Yeah. And I like to think about it instead of the word map, what I give it the word portal. It's like a doorway. Yeah. And I love astrology. It's changed my life. No exaggeration. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, completely. And it's always changing because there's always deeper to go. That's why I call myself an integrative astrologer, because I've started in certain frameworks like Hellenistic and traditional, classical, modern, Western astrology, and now I'm actually a Vedic astrologer. And
Hmm.
in between, there have been, gene keys and human design. All of the different things, all of the different portals of divination and self-awareness. I love that so much. I couldn't agree more. It really is a portal. And even thinking about it that way, it's like if you tune into the charts, you can actually um, open that portal to your ancestors, and you can actually see them and their story in the chart, which I think is one of the most healing things. So even if we bring it to that nexus point of, being a parent, or wanting to be a parent, or doing some reparenting for yourself, there is this way to look at the past and the future and the different patterns that are maybe still playing out or that have played out, and what might be the echoes of those patterns. So that's what I'm hoping to explore a little bit today.
Yeah. And I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about that. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So should we just dive in?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, let's go for it. So there's a key concept in astrology, particularly Vedic astrology, that brings us to the conversation of karma and dharma. And I know that that can be a tricky word. It carries all sorts of connotations. And I just wanted to say, as a foundation, that it's not ever about punishment, it's about making something right. And that also means that just because you have something going on, it doesn't mean you did something to deserve it. It doesn't mean that you did something wrong. Even in that guise of needing to make something right, it's that something is ready to be explored. Something is ripe. There's this idea of different kinds of karma. So there's our prabdhara karma, which is like all of the karma that we've amassed over all of our many lifetimes. And then there's the karma that we came to explore in this life, which is just a tiny sliver of that. And part of that is our ancestral karma. It's what were we given by our ancestors that perhaps they might not have been able to complete, or, did something happen, perhaps something painful, something traumatizing that we might need to reconcile. If you go back in history, from being anywhere in the world, from any culture, there are stories of trauma and alienation, isolation, separation. And myself having, being in North America, I mean, all of us here can probably relate to that in some way because we can all trace our lineage back to at some point having to cross a massive ocean and separate from a homeland, unless you're indigenous to this place. And so even something like that, the karma of not being in the place where some of your ancestors, where most of your ancestors formed their cultural awareness, it can contribute to this feeling of loss without knowing why. There's this beautiful, I think it's from Wales. It's a Welsh word or a Celtic word, hiraeth, and it describes a longing for a home that you never knew or that you're not sure if you've known, but you just have that sort of longing. And I think that longing is what calls us into this kind of self-exploration, is because we're trying to understand, where do we belong and who am I in all of this? And so that it's not just about the individual.
Mhm.
It's about something that is so deep within us. It's in our DNA, it's in our biology, and our charts can actually find that. We can point to that. Very quick example, we can look at the fourth house and understand our mother. We can look at the planetary ruler of the fourth house and understand a little bit of her story. So, a personal example, my fourth house has the sign of Cancer. Cancer is ruled by the moon, which already is a signifier for mother. And then I have my moon in the 10th house, which, just a very simple story of that. I grew up with a mother who worked very hard and had to balance, career and home and family, and kind of always felt herself stretched to that. And then I look at my own life and I'm like, huh, interesting. I'm kind of doing the same thing. I'm in a way mirroring one of her patterns, out of, whether it was survival or, the need to kind of make it for a time. She was a single mom, and that need to be able to hold the responsibility and the burden. My moon is in Capricorn. There's a burden energy associated with that sometimes, to kind of hold the family together, and then still be able to find time to soften and nourish self. So that's a core um, dilemma that I think a lot of moms go through in this time, because there are so many different ways to make a living, and some involve, working 9 to 5 jobs, 40-hour weeks, and then some, you might be so lucky to be able to craft your own schedule. But either way, there's always that balance going on and that pulling of your attention. And so for me, I had to look at that dynamic that I witnessed in my mom and see, okay, where was it like balanced in a way that was maybe unhealthy? Like, where were there 80-hour weeks instead of 40-hour weeks, for the idea of like overtime and like wanting to make sure we had Christmas presents, things like that. Versus what might I be able to shift from that pattern so that I can still hold this dynamic of kind of being, having a career and also being a mom. And what is really necessary? What of that might have been conditioning of like, okay, I need to work this hard and make this amount of money to be able to give my children this level of, material foundation, versus what if I would have spent more time with them, more quality connecting time? Would that have been okay? So I think about this all the time. And so you can maybe look at your own chart, what's in your fourth house? That's a universal indicator of mother. So this is true for everybody. And then look at the planet that rules your fourth house. what it might not be the moon unless you also have Aries rising and a Cancer in your fourth house. Uh,
Yeah, I have Aquarius on the fourth house, and my
ah,
moon is on the fourth house as well.
oh wow,
Yeah, yeah.
that's so fascinating. So for you, you would definitely want to look at Saturn, and then maybe if you're bringing in the modern rulerships of Uranus as well, and so
Mhm.
both of those, and then how might you craft the story of your relationship with your mother and what you observed with her?
Oh, wow. So I understand that when we look at the astrology profile, it can give you certain clues on how you as a parent and as a mother especially can shift those patterns that are frustrating you right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wow. That's really powerful. It,
Yeah.
yeah. Especially for someone who has blind spots or for me, I have many blind spots, and in my journey as in motherhood, it took a lot of external wake-up calls to indicate this is not right, this is not right, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
but then I looked at astrology afterwards and I said, yeah, this is exactly true. I wish I knew before the wake-up calls happened.
Yes, yeah. I have
Yeah.
that conversation probably daily in sessions with clients. It's like, I wish I would have known this 10 years ago, because you can kind of project out and look at, okay, this is a potential pattern. But at the same time, I think part of the journey is to just experience it, not knowing, and see what we did from a place of innocence,
Mm,
knowing that we couldn't maybe have chosen any better than we did in that moment. But,
yeah.
if it's coming to you now, I really believe that the tools that we need in our lives come to us when we're ready to use them too.
Mhm.
So maybe if you're hearing this now and you want to dive into that deeper. And so I very much recommend, that deep fourth house, that rulership exploration, and the moon in a general sense as mother, as a kind of co-significator for everybody. And then if we want to look at father, there's a lot of very interesting things with father, because you might have heard of the 10th house having an association with father, but in Vedic astrology, there's also a very strong ninth house um, correlation. And the ninth house is also the house of beliefs and worldviews. And if you do think about father and father line, there's this sort of traditional idea that the father is sort of passing down the wisdom lineage, right? Passing down the traditions, and that's how you will then take it forward and bring it out into the world. And that really bridges ninth house and 10th house themes. So you want to look at what's happening in your ninth house, what planet might, if there are planets there, what planet rules that house, where that planet is, and then how do those planets talk to each other? That planet that
Mm,
rules the fourth house and represents mother, the planets that rule ninth, 10th, you can kind of gauge that. Every chart's a little different. And this is where it gets very personalized, but you can look at, okay, what planet do I really believe signifies my father? And it's often connected to ninth or 10th, but we also want to look at Sun and Saturn. And then you kind of look, okay, how are they talking to each other? And this is one of the most fascinating things that I've noticed in reading, I don't know, what is probably in the thousands of charts by this point, because I've been doing this for 20 years. So it's been a long time. Um, is that if you've got Moon Saturn stuff, that can mean conjunctions, Moon in a Saturn sign like Capricorn or Aquarius, opposition, squares. If they're making any kind of aspect with each other, you've got parenting stuff that you have to work through. And so I would almost love to see the stats on this for you, Nadine, and for anybody coming to this kind of summit. We all probably here have some Moon Saturn stuff going on. And it is usually because there's such a deep responsibility, that's Saturn, to do it in the way that is the most we want to leave a positive legacy. There's usually this desire to really uphold lineage and tradition to the way that it is beneficial. And then also to look at, okay, well, where do I need to shift patterns? And then also thinking about the next 7 generations. That those tend to be themes that I see really prominent with Moon Saturn people.
mhm. Wow. Yeah, amazing, amazing stuff.
Yeah, it's so powerful. So another thing too is if we're tuning into um, what our parents are carrying as well. This is where we can actually go into divisional charts. And this is way more advanced than just looking at the birth chart. And so it's more of a pique your interest kind of thing. But you can actually look at different divisional charts like your D45, which is a division of your paternal ancestry. And you can actually look and see these are themes that not only has my father gone through, but also probably his father and fathers before that. It kind of shows this collection of karmas, this collection of energy that you are really here to work through. And then you can kind of see, well, how does that relate to me? And what part of that am I really working on? And you might have heard the term, double signature or triple signature. It's basically when you see a similar pattern echoing across all of these different divisional charts. Say you see a lot of Scorpio, for example, you see that archetype showing up a lot in all of your divisional charts, then you know that in this life, there's no getting around doing deep transformational soul work, you know, understanding yourself psychologically, perhaps exploring therapy, exploring the occult, exploring astrology. I gave that example because I have a lot of that. Or if you have a lot of a certain element, air, perhaps, then you know that you're going to be exploring a lot of story and maybe reworking of the story, really understanding the story. If you have a lot of fire, you might be exploring this sense of spirituality or creativity, this spark that really drives you and motivates you. And if you have a lot of water, which is very, or sorry, earth, because I already shared about the water example with Scorpio. If you have a lot of earth, a lot of times there's an important need to build something, to actually leave a very tangible legacy behind. And you can actually start to trace through all of your divisional charts the presiding elements. So for me, I have a lot of water and I do have a good mix of everything, but water really sticks out. And I have benefited so much from doing deep emotional processing and just allowing myself to feel without being afraid. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about my own inner teen experience or my own teen experience, which I think there's always inner teen work to be done that we can absolutely use astrology to to go into. But I was very unafraid. Like I would just call it as I saw it. I would speak the truth, and I can look back and see, okay, I spoke the truth and got in trouble. And then I slowly started learning, oh, I'm speaking the truth and getting in trouble. I'm going to stop speaking the truth
Mm.
because I don't want to keep getting in trouble.
Yeah.
Or facing that kind of, I didn't want to be in constant conflict.
Hmm.
And then I would feel kind of like misunderstood, like that actually wasn't, I didn't want to say it in that way that was trying to hurt anybody. I was saying it in a way of like, I actually want things to be more harmonious. I actually want things to be improved or better for everyone. And I also want to honor this truth. And it took me, through my whole 20s, I would say, to explore that and into my 30s to realize that truth that was so easy and natural for me as a teen is also my superpower. And it took me, a lot of having to decondition from the hiding of that superpower, which is also a Scorpio theme. So if you have Scorpio, you're probably feeling really called out right now. But it's true for every sign, for every archetype. There are these superpowers that I think when we're in that beautiful nexus spot between, child and adult, when we're in that in between place, we are, I think, at some of our most free, least inhibited expression of ourselves, where there's so much gold and so much jewels. And so it would be really worthwhile to explore, okay, what are these core archetypes, these core planets and signs and patterns showing up in my chart? And how do they show up when I was a teenager? And how do they show up differently now? And if I have children, how are they showing up in my children? If I think about my parents, how did they show up in my parents? Um, Something that I noticed that happens a lot, and I love reading family charts and looking at people's parents and children and siblings too. That's a really fun one because not every sibling has the same experience of their parents. So you
Hmm.
can actually see the different perceptions there. But to see, okay, what are the repeat signatures? Everybody's working with a Mars Jupiter. Oh, interesting. How are you with exploring truth and wisdom and then, taking a stance? That's very Mars Jupiter. I've seen a lot of Venus Saturn, finding boundaries in relationship. Interesting that you, your mom, and your grandmother all have that. How interesting. And then it's never about saying, oh no, we didn't do it right because we have the same archetype showing up. I think it's more like, how are we doing it different? Or what are we learning about this? How is it, how might it be slowly shifting? Um, when I think about my personal experience with what I had just mentioned around this sort of self-filtering process that became a bit of a natural result of some of my experiences as a teen. I have Venus in Scorpio, and so there can be quite like a guarded experience. Like, oh, if I'm open and vulnerable, but then it's not met, then I'm like, oh, it wasn't met. Put the wall up, and then being really guarded. And then my daughter, she has her Venus in Pisces, which is pure expression, pure freedom of expression. And she does not hold anything back. And to me, when I look at that, I've had the experience of kind of noticing, oh, like what might I have been told when I was like in full emotional expression mode? Would I have been told to rein it in? Would I have been told to maybe try to, contain that a little bit? Well, instead, looking at it as like, wow, this is the evolution. It kind of shows me like maybe I have allowed myself to open up and express more freely. And it's such a beautiful opportunity to do that healing work with her by not telling her to stop expressing. So
Mhm.
that's a lot of the ways that it can show up too. It's like we're still here with our children. We're doing it live. There's no dress rehearsal of this. We're doing the healing in every interaction. And so I think in that sense, it can be really helpful to be aware of your own patterns. And then how is it similar? How is it very different in the charts of your children and in their expression? And then instead of it being this idea of like, okay, I'm the parent, I have to like control this somehow. How do I also take this as an opportunity to see them as my teacher, to see her as my teacher? And she absolutely is. She has been my greatest teacher in her, only 9 years so far on this earth. So it goes all of the ways. I'm really curious about if you've noticed things like that, Nadine.
I have, and that's my story. It's like my kids are my teachers. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Uh, Funny enough, I also have Venus in Scorpio, and it's conjunct Pluto as well. So it's like I understand that feeling of wanting to hide and rein everything in. And for me, because the conditions around me did not allow that, I didn't learn the right tools to express that out or to. Um, I, I I always felt shame about it, and that shame made it worse. And as you said, it takes a lot of unlearning and freeing yourself from the conditioning. I wanted to touch on something you've said. You've said that the astrology archetypes are superpowers. And I just wanted to highlight that because I know that in astrology, there's the low frequency, the high frequency, everything has both shadow and light. But when we look at the astrology from that point of view, that they are actually superpowers, that is a very empowering approach. I'm not sure if you have anything on that, just for like from a parenting point of view. As you mentioned, like you allow your daughter to express herself, her Venus in Pisces, because that's her superpower.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I think, astrology or not, it's about identifying those things, like really witnessing, just observing, not projecting, but just seeing, okay, like how is this beautiful person that I have the absolute blessing and privilege of guiding and keeping safe, what are they showing me about what is so important to them? What are they passionate about? How do they express? And identifying that and then maybe going into the charts and seeing, okay, I could see how that shows up here. That's really my preference of how to do it rather than saying, oh,
Okay.
it's in the chart. Now let's overlay it onto the person.
Okay.
So I think that's really important. But once you get to that space of, okay, now we're interacting with this full awareness of what they've got going on and their charts. So I mentioned a little bit about elements, and I think that can be a really beautiful way to begin if you're newer to astrology, is just understanding, okay, if they've got strong Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, that fire, that superpower of courage is going to be very strong and very important for them. And especially with strong fire, it's very delicate. I have a candle in front of me and it's like the most simple blowing on it, if the flame is small, can put that fire out. And that can be so very sad because it can be difficult for a person with strong fire if they experience their parents as like, let's put that little tiny flame that's just starting to express when we put that out. So it's being aware of if there are any behaviors that we have or any little things that we say that do that. On the reverse for fire, fire is also the easiest to get out of hand. So it's like a constant, high need, high observation, high interaction needs to be happening with fire because it does have the potential to wreak havoc as well. So we want to be aware of healthy boundaries and healthy containers for the child that has strong fire, but just to always view it as a superpower and it's, I think, a lot about teaching them how to see it as a superpower
Mm,
too. And like,
yeah.
how do I tend to my own inner flame? And how do I kindle it? How do I give the fire what it needs without overwhelming or stifling? And then if we look at Earth, that speaks beautifully to the need for safety, security, container. A lot of children with strong Earth are often worried. These are the signs of Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And so especially when it's the moon, actually, if your child is under 12 or maybe 13, there's not like a hard and fast line on this, but when we're still young and developing kind of pre-puberty time, we're very lunar. That might be the only archetype, maybe a couple others that you're really seeing. So you want to know their moon sign and moon placement. But the Earth moon is going to be kind of always thinking like, do I have enough? Like, am I doing this right? Uh, is there something that I'm missing? Like there tend to be themes of enoughness and correctness, and the Earth, because of that, because of that awareness of resource or the lack of, their superpower is definitely connected to um, the ability to manage resources. So they actually tend to need a little bit more responsibility from a younger age so that they can explore that. Because if you're just like doing everything for them because they're worried or like really fixated on security, but they want you to do it for them, then you might be kind of not allowing them to explore, okay, how do I strengthen this for myself? So the earth is very sensitive, but often does really well with independence and kind of doing it their own way and experimenting. And I know for parents that could sometimes be sketchy. Like my daughter just went to a birthday party. It was beautiful, but it was like a slime birthday party. And I was like, oh no, we are a slime-free zone in this house. No, I'm just kidding. There's been slime, but glitter and slime and glue and scissors on beds. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have an earth moon. So I'm like, oh, that's gonna get messy and I'm gonna have to clean that later. But I also want you to have fun. Like there's just so much that goes into that. So then I think, okay, how do we make a clear container? Okay, you could do this outside on the patio with this newspaper underneath. You know, like it's really important to not deny the earth moon people their ability to experiment, but of course with safety and boundaries. And then if we tune into the air people with really strong air, there tends to be a high need for constant relating or constant communication. And especially when we get to an older age, like as a teen, the opportunity to debate, the opportunity to argue, and that is sometimes can be seen as a form of disrespect. You mentioned the archetype of Aquarius is actually most often known for that, because Aquarius can sometimes know everything. Right? It's like, wait, I know this and you don't understand. It can sometimes be an arrogance, but the truth is that Aquarius probably actually really does know. And so to be really heard and listened to, and perhaps, showing curiosity to not dissuade that person, because we're never just one archetype. You mentioned Aquarius, and I'm assuming maybe your moon is there.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Scorpio, those are two very different archetypes, right? Scorpio is a lot more hidden, and um, Aquarius can be kind of aloof, a little bit observational. So they share that in terms of the fact that they can both kind of hang back and watch what's going on. But Aquarius really has something to say, whereas Scorpio can be kind of happy not saying it sometimes. So even within each person, there are going to be different spaces where those different parts
Mhm.
of themselves are expressing. But it is absolutely a superpower of information. And I always see the air signs as like librarians. It's like air signs are constantly learning and need to take in a lot of information and have to have a high level of different kinds of relationships. And that can sometimes be interesting as a teen because there's the whole idea of like peer pressure. If my mom used to say this to me. She's like, if all your friends are going to jump off a bridge, would you do it? And you always say, no, of course not, mom. But then like you're in the moment and you're like, oh man, I really want to jump off this bridge, you know? So there's a lot of negotiation. Um, but as a parent, how do you allow them to explore and really allow them to take their open-mindedness where they want to take it and allowing that space for like healthy debate and challenging things? It really, I think, can set them up. These are like the lawyers and maybe diplomats and politicians that we would like to see, in places of power, rather than the powers that should not be, right? So, and then if we look at water, this is often a pretty misunderstood superpower because it usually is learned through chaos and mess. It's not neat, it's not linear. And actually, the three water signs, so Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, the water signs are considered mute. That's one way that astrology can classify the water signs. They don't communicate through words. They can certainly find words, but a lot of times the water is trying to communicate through resonance, through setting the mood, the tone, like how are you physically showing up? And then also the immense readability of energy in a space. I used to be very confused by that when I was young. I was like, somebody is going through something really intense in this room, but they're not talking about it. And I'm feeling the discord there. And now I'm asking a question like, okay, what's going on? And everybody's saying, no, it's fine. And then I have the experience of not trusting my intuition.
Yeah.
That happens a lot with water people. It can be this sort of unintentional gaslighting in order to, usually it's from a good place, like, oh, I want to keep you safe. I don't want to, if it's a parent like going through something difficult, they don't want to admit to their children that they're going through something difficult, right? We're kind of taught to compartmentalize. But for a highly intuitive water person, they might see that as a lie or a disconnection. So there's again that deep importance of truth and relating beyond words is really powerful. I find that water people, and honestly, I kind of argue this for everybody, but especially water people need art, need some way to express that goes beyond logic and reason, and the ability and the support to get messy. That really is what what fosters those superpowers because our water people are our counselors, our therapists, our psychics, our intuitives, and also tend to be really loving and nourishing parents. But we, especially in our younger years, it can be really confusing. So it's especially now. This is the really fun thing. Imagine you're the parent and you have a really strong water child, but you yourself are like all earth and air and you're like, I do not understand. Like, this does not compute. This is not logical. That actually is the case with my husband and my daughter. And so I find myself, I'm the intermediary between the two because I understand them both. And he's always like, why are you crying? I just want to know why you're crying because it can really, Venus and Pisces, it can happen for like what seems to be no reason. right? And that's
Yeah.
also, hormones and shifting. And there's a lot just being a woman that I think a lot of times men don't fully understand because they're maybe a little bit more even all the time. But it's, just crafting that gentleness to say, okay, there's not actually a problem. Like crying does not equal problem. And that's a lot of the coaching that happens at our house, for example. But it this is where I think astrology can really help, because I think one of the core conditionings that most of us actually suffer from is this sort of homogenization, from mainstream culture that says this is just how we're all supposed to be, this is normal, this is the box that we're all just supposed to fit in. And the truth is that none of us do. So if we know that we don't fit in that, why would we expect our children to fit in that box? And our parents, it kind of it goes in all directions. And so it really helps to learn, I think, a little bit more about these other archetypes that might not be you. We're often very tempted to just, look at our own charts, but I think it's very important to learn about the others that you might not have as represented for you, because chances are people in your life that you love really do, and it might help you understand them better. I know for me it offered a lot of understanding when I would look at, say, my mom's chart or my dad's chart and see, like, wow, they've got a really strong pain point around expression, and here I am thinking that they're not expressing with me because they don't like me or they don't understand me. I was like making it about myself, and I was like, actually they've got this whole other thing going on that's really tough for them. So maybe now as an adult I can be more of a space holder for them, and kind of, helping them do their own reparenting. It's never this, static linear role or box.
Yeah, that's such a powerful approach to understanding the people you love. Yeah,
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 absolutely.
yeah. Uh, anything else on I know we veered off the ancestral astrology a bit, but yeah, anything else to wrap it up?
So I think of it as all really quite, part of the one conversation, because as we tune into the patterns that have shown up in our lives and our ancestors and our parents and our children, we can maybe identify all of the superpowers, so that can be sort of like a homework, a way to a takeaway from this. And you can use astrology for that, or you can use really any modality for that. But hopefully I've given you a few little nuggets to take away, as to how you can approach that with astrology. But ultimately, it's, I think, about understanding the patterns. What is recurring. Have there been patterns of silencing? Have there been patterns with boundaries, or struggling with faith, or the ability to speak your truth? And where do you feel this pattern living inside you? Is it in your inner child? Is it, which might be a little bit more of a safety thing? If it's in your inner teen, maybe there's more of a rebellious questioning part that's like, wait, I want to do something about this. I see the problem and I want to address it, which I think, that's how I really see the one of the sort of general superpowers of a teen, is to be able to be courageous and confront these things a little bit more head on. And then tune into the healing threads. What one small choice can I make to loosen this knot, rather than feeling like I've got to fix everything all at once. It's not possible. you know I've got to make all these changes. No, just bring it to today, and bring it to, okay, right now this is what I'm observing, and I'm aware that it's connected to this really big pattern in my family, but like, this is one small thing that I can do today to maybe shift the tides ever so slightly. And you know any kind of emotional processing parts work, I think, is highly beneficial. And where I really see the value and benefit of astrology is to give your mind something to anchor on, like we said in the beginning, as this doorway, this portal into the healing. So you might say, okay, I want to explore my moon, and just go into the moon and all of the archetypal, bits and pieces that you can uncover there, and do the healing work around there, rather than, trying to do everything all at once.
Yeah, yeah. This has been amazing. I know you have a wonderful gift for our listeners. Would you like to share about that?
Yes. So this gift, it's called Your Sacred Calling, and it's really about the core aim of your career and your vocation and your contribution to community. I go a lot into the 10th house and what it is that we put out in the world. But what's not necessarily mentioned up front is that this is also very empowering for parenting because the 10th house has a lot to do with what we contribute to our community, but also through our parenting experience. So you can get some more information about the planetary ruler of your 10th house and then where that planet sits in your chart and understand a little bit more about your karma and dharma and ways to work with it.
Yeah, thank you so much. So the link to download that gift is will be below this video, and all the links to find more about Nora and all the work she does. Um, so we'll finish with just what's one final message you our listeners with.
Hmm. That you are safe to do this work, that your ancestors are absolutely celebrating whenever you do this work, and that you are already, you can't get this wrong. You're already doing so much more than you know just by being here. And so being really gentle with yourself and showing up the best you can day by day is really all that's needed. So you're already doing a great job.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Nadine.